Hello and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and participants who will be joining us through Facebook Live. Welcome to this thought provoking panel discussion centered around the captivating yet complex intersection of media, films, and violence. Today, in this panel discussion hosted by the International Academy of Ethics, we gather to delve into a topic that has ignited debates, sparked controversies, and captured our collective consciousness all together. In an era where screens permeate our lives, delivering a vast array of audio-visual narratives, it has become essential to critically examine the impact of these powerful mediums on our perceptions, on our understanding, and our response to violence. Films and media bearing the capacity to both inform and shape our societal attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors have become an integral part of our cultural fabric. Therefore, this discussion stands as an opportune platform to dissect the multifaceted dimensions of this subject matter. We aim to navigate the complexities, exploring the entwined relationship between films, media, and violence. From the influence of on screen portrayals on real life aggression to the role of media literacy in interpreting and engaging with violent content, we embark on a journey of intellectual inquiry. So, to begin with this panel discussion at the very outset, I invite our founder president, president of Academy of Ethics, Dr. Jarnail Singh Anand, to briefly introduce the theme and the urgency to talk about this theme on this platform. Dr. Anand.
Thank you, Dr. Praneeth Jaggi. Today we have with us world's best minds in Dr. Prasenjit Viswas from Shillong, Professor Diana Milovezic, theatre personality from Serbia, and Dr. Taran Achuri from Colombia. Friends, the issue before us is the increasing use of violence in films and by the media who report violent incidents on priority and in gory details, leaving nothing to imagination. Our basic questions are: why do the filmmakers enact violent scenes in gory details? Are they really entertaining the masses? Are we people so bloodthirsty that we want murders and killings? Is it the pursuit of money that is the final temptation? Do these people want creative liberty at the cost of social responsibility? How has this passion for violence affected the tastes of the general mass of people? Only films which show extreme violence become highest grosses and succeed at the box office. How can we deny that there is violence in films because people want it? That can be the reason which needs to be explored. Apart from this spectacle of physical violence, violence in media and films also takes place in the shape of intellectual violence when we do not report what is necessary and prefer to report things which divert the narrative. And when people start craving for violence, you are creating such a taste for it and spend hours together on TV watching violent films instead of spending time on personal relations, parents, their homework, and in the playground. It leads to the conspiracy of weakening of the minds of the people. It is a conspiracy. And it is tantamount to psychological violence. Then we have to look at media. They have a soft corner for bloody incidents. If someone has committed a crime, His full length photo is published with all details. But if you have released a book, you have to run from pillar to post to get it published. If at all it is published, it is in the briefs. But if you can pick a pocket and organize a mob beating, newspapers have sufficient space to report it with photographs, and a TV channel might come to cover the incident. What does it show? Is it not absolute lack of sensitivity towards finer aspects and lasting values of life? I leave these questions to our panelists to debate and decide. For me, even films are a sort of literature like books. They too are meant to help the society learn the arts of living. And media also is a powerful arm of a society. What alarms me is that wealth accumulation has become such a powerful incentive and violence such a powerful weapon that all other considerations lose their relevance before them. So, this is the scene that is coming up um, in the name of entertainment. We are showing crass violence, and there are other aspects also nudity, foul language, all that. So, let us embark on this journey. Thank you, Panitji. Please carry on.
Thank you, Dr. Anand. This shows the urgency of the problem that we need to address. I now invite Dr. Maya Herman Sekulik, Vice President, International Academy of Ethics, for a formal welcome of the guests today. Professor Randhir Gautam, you're requested to kindly help with the video of Dr. Maya.
This is Maya Herman Sekulic, Vice President of the Academy of Ethics. I want to address all the esteemed panelists who will talk about violence in media, in films and television and so on. And I just want to open this discussion by saying that when I did some research on the subject for this panel, I found that there is a direct connection between violence in media and actual real violence, and that the media is contributing to more violence amongst the youth in schools, and there were two examples of that recently in Belgrade. The one really horrific crime that happened and was actually done by a young child, a 13-and-a-half-year-old boy, and that there is a lot of imitation, copying of the violence that one could see in movies, which brings us to a desensitization of especially youth. They become, they have less empathy for other human beings or animals or nature. So it is extremely important that we not only raise this subject, but try very hard to minimize this violence in media by not only discussing it, but really introducing ethics in schools and in culture. So I hope the panel will bring some results in that direction, and that we will not only discuss things but start being active. Thank you so much for your attention, and I wish you a very successful panel, and special regards to my dear friend, Dr. Anand. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Maja, for the message. Today, we are privileged to have a distinguished panel of experts from various fields, theatre and film, psychology and philosophy, who bring forth a wealth of knowledge and diverse viewpoints on this theme. I'm sure their expertise will guide us through the intricacies of this topic, enabling us to navigate the blurred lines between fiction and reality, between artistic expression and societal impact. So, once again, I extend a heartiest welcome to all our panelists, our guests, and I invite our panelists to embark on this intellectual odyssey with us as we unravel the complex tapestry of this connection between media, films, and violence and its impact on the society. So, joining with us today, in the very first place, from India, we have Professor Prasanjit Biswas. I welcome you, sir. Professor Biswas is a professor of philosophy at Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. He has also been associated with IIT Bombay, IIT Guwahati, and other prestigious institutions of India. And his research interests reflect an interdisciplinary orientation that includes ethnophilosophy, ethnicity, and indigenous identities. He's also a human rights defender who works with the Barak Human Rights Protection Committee, Silchar. Professor Biswas specializes in continental philosophy and phenomenology with an emphasis on Derrida, Jean-Luc Nancy, etc. He's also worked on post-Marxist thoughts, non-philosophy, and currently is exploring the notion of aporia in social theory. I welcome you, sir, and I hope to have useful, diverse views from your side on this theme. Next, joining with us today is Professor Diana Milosevic. She is an award-winning theatre director, activist, writer, and professor, Institute for Modern Dance, Belgrade. She's also director, DAH Theatre Research Center for Culture and Social Change, which is doing lots of work in this field. She has been closely associated with social organizations, art and culture organizations, and also feminists. A recipient of prestigious awards and fellowships like Fulbright, etc. She's also taught at several universities like Georgia University, San Francisco, Columbia, Georgetown, Royal Central School, London, Concordia, Canada, to name a few. I welcome you, ma'am. Also joining us today evening on the panel is Professor Tyrone Echuri from Columbia. He's a professor of political philosophy in Columbia, an expert in virtual education and author of several books like Democracy and Terrorism, a director of a YouTube channel of philosophy named Ethos Philosophico, director of university radio program in Columbia, namely Talking with Sophia. I welcome you, sir. And we are delighted to have you all as our guests today, and we hope to have diverse views and a healthy discussion on the theme that we are touching today. Now, throughout our deliberations, we shall question the extent to which violent media desensitizes, molds, or mirrors our perception of violence. We shall also try to scrutinize the responsibility of filmmakers, the content creators, and media organizations in shaping the ethical narratives while also respecting artistic freedom. We shall also endeavor to uncover the alternative forms of media representation that may promote empathy, conflict resolution, and nonviolent behavior. So, with your kind consent, may we proceed to the questions from our panelists. May I request Professor Diana, may I have your mic on, please, so that we may discuss, because you're very closely associated with theatre. Uh, Professor Diana, what do you think? How does the current state of media and digital entertainment, with its excessive emphasis on instant gratification, challenge the essence of live theatre as a unique and transformative art form? If we see it from a creative perspective or a philosophical perspective, because you have been associated with theatre for a very, very long time. So, how does this current state of media entertainment or digital entertainment challenge the basic essence of live theatre, which was a kind of a transformative art form from ages, from that perspective? What is your take on this, ma'am?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like really to thanks for inviting me to take a part in this panel that I think is extremely important, as you said, also urgent. These are urgent questions of our times. I would also like to extend my thanks to Dr. Maja Herman Sekulic to introduce me to International Academy of Ethics. I would like to offer one statistics here. Making research for my play that I was directing at my theater in Belgrade, that was dealing with the topic of children's rights. We found statistics that say that, speaking about Europe and Northern America, that the average child until the 18th years of the age old witnesses through TV programs, video games and medias about 200,000 violent scenes. So this is I was really shocked when I heard about that number, because what are we then speaking about the forming of the psyche of the young people that are becoming adults, that are going to create our societies. So this is one example, one statistic that I wanted to offer. And then also another statistics that I found when I was also doing research for the play that was dealing with the capital punishment in general. And then statistics say about US that the states that still practice capital punishment, that unlike the argument that the capital punishment serves to stop the violence, what is happening in reality is completely opposite. That when the capital punishment is executed, the level of violence increases in the state or in the city. And we can say why. And then, of course, in both examples, we can speak about giving sort of permission for the violence. And this is what I consider as something that we need to urgently react to, giving permission to the violence, and also making it, as you said, as Maya actually said, as something that is normal, something that is acceptable, that we are completely desensitized about violence. So, of course, speaking about media and film that are reaching a vast number of people, it is the situation is far more different than in the theater, because speaking about film and media that are also the forms of entertainment, we can see this kind of the let's say insistence on entertainment that would be addressing the very basic instincts in people. So when I speak about art and culture, and I consider theater as the really like artistic form, first of all, I'm not speaking about entertainment. And I think that we need to speak more about arts and culture rather than entertainment, because arts and culture and theater engage us deeply and ask us to pose the questions. They are not giving us easy answers. They are not feeding us. And I'm often thinking about this kind of the prevailing violence in the films and in media as feeding us like sugar. You know, we all know that sugar, white sugar, is really not healthy, and it is in so much food that is offered to the people today. So it is kind of the substance, violence as a substance that has this addictive side, and those who are making profits basically count with that. So rather, we should really turn to transformative power of the arts and culture, including theater, that really has this capacity to reach people, to reach human being on different levels, emotional, spiritual, mental, and so on.
Yeah, I quite agree with you, and especially with the help of the statistics that you have quoted. Professor Diana, I want to know, the present generation now takes art, culture, and entertainment almost on the same plane, on the same plan. Do you think they're able to segregate the two as different territories? Entertainment is different, and we need to explore art, form, and culture and our heritage. Do you think this generation coming with a digital transformation will be able to segregate the two things and preserve art and culture vis-a-vis the entertainment they are into all the time?
Yes, I think absolutely yes. They are able to do that, and you know, I'm not speaking anything against the digital arts and the arts that uses technology and so on. But then we come to this dimension that is ethical, of course. And so, what is the value of the arts and the culture that we are speaking about? Are we really trying to do like a deep research about the human condition, humanity, history, and so on through the pieces of arts and culture? Or are we simply satisfying this kind of the very superficial need for the entertainment? And, you know, speaking really, because I'm working a lot with my students, and of course, we are using lots of the technologies in YouTube and finding examples on YouTube and so on. And they know how to distinct what is like the superficial and empty entertainment from what is really art. They feel it. Sometimes they understand it. And then our responsibility as educators, pedagogues, professors, and so on, intellectuals, is really to help them to understand what makes something really important piece of art and what is simply entertainment. And then of course sometimes I'm joking with them and say, I tell them like, okay, when I was studying, that was many years ago, we had maybe like 1-2 videotapes with very important examples of contemporary theater or dance. And then those videotapes would be traveling throughout all the Europe. I mean, it was like a gold, because we really needed to see, I mean, the
Treasure.
artistic form that we need to see, you know, like really, if we cannot see it in a person, then at least for video. And then automatically we absolutely understood what was good, simply speaking, what had a great artistic value. Well, today you go to YouTube and you have millions of examples of different things, different art forms or not art, entertainment, and so on. So I say that sometimes my main job as professor is to point to them what are the good examples on YouTube. So their problem is different than ours. I mean, many years ago, their problem is how to really distinct from the variety of the many materials, examples, and so on, and to pick up what is really valuable. And then again, we come to the importance of education, of the education that is infused with ethics, speaking about the value of education, because I'm coming from the country that used to be Yugoslavia, now it is Serbia, where education was highly regarded. And I'm witnessing how it is changing. And so I think it is very important to be aware of that process.
Yeah, true. Professor Diana, I was going through clipping, a video on YouTube posted by your theater, I suppose, and it describes the response of the Dart theater to civil war in the former Yugoslavia and the transformative effects of these performances on both actors and audience members. Now, here is what our chief concern is, that do we still witness that theater has an enduring presence or an effect as a physical and communal event on humanity as a whole and on the exploration of existential questions on human connections and the experiences of truth and meaning? What is the present stance? What is the present status of theater as a means to effect that existential search for truth? Is it still the same, which used to be like you were mentioning in your theatrical projects, that this is to effect man's mind, how, so don't you think nowadays that Aristotle's theory of catharsis is being reversed, that now people are more desensitized after watching too much violence? There is a decreased emotional response to real life violence. Don't you think so?
I would say, speaking about theater, the situation is on the contrary. The more the media and films present violence and also present cheap entertainment, the bigger is need for the art and the theater that has this transformative dimension. Of course, not all theater, not all art has it. And we have theater that is done like in 3 weeks with the cheap plays that are really with the function to entertain only, or even to, make the blurred picture of reality or whatever. And then there is the theater that I'm speaking about and interested in. And so with, of course, many artists around the world being involved in that is really serving to its community. And I think this is really very important because theater has this unique ability to reach live people. So we are in a live communication, and even right now we are in communication thanks to technology, but it creates all the difference when we are in the same place, sharing the same space, physical space, and really talking to, being in dialogue. Even, I mean, that you as an audience, you are obviously not talking, but of course then the spectators are being engaged on different levels during the theatrical performances. That is not the similar, or that is absolutely different from when you are having like the film that is just serving to like cover very, let's say, superficial topics. I mean, I witnessed really with the plays, with the show, with the performances we did, that this enormous transformative power of the theater, because theater has a couple of unique abilities. I mean, art has unique ability, for example, to contain contradiction. Not many fields of the human activities are having this ability. As I said already, theater and arts could reach different levels of the human being simultaneously. And also, we can have different opinions. We can disagree in the safe surrounding, and really understanding the other, understanding the face of the other, suddenly understanding the viewpoint of the other. And this is happening much more intensely when you are dealing with a live presence than when you are having the basically media situation. So I would say that I think theater will always exist, and because there is increasing need for communities really to engage with important questions, and we can see in a way increase the numbers of the theater and artistic collectives that are working on the intersection of arts and human rights and conflict resolution with the really high effectiveness.
Yeah, that is actually required also. That is the need of the day also. So, Professor Diana, do you think the same is the case with films also? You're associated with filmmaking also. But I think
Uh,
that's a different platform in the sense that you don't have the audience live, and you the connection is not so close in films.
yes,
Films
yeah.
is more in the entertainment section, and it is just served to the public, irrespective of what the public will react or ingest or digest later on. So, what about the
Yeah.
films? The scene is
No,
different.
there are absolutely. I don't want to do any wrong to the filmmakers, and they're amazing film, very important, and speaking socially, ethically, aesthetically, and so on. And of course, I think probably we are all agreeing here that if we speak about aesthetic, we need to speak about ethics as well. And there are lots of enormously important films, and also that are raising very important questions. And the big advantage of the film is that it can reach many, many people all around the world. But then, of course, there is the dangerous side of the film, because, of course, people could be manipulated and wrong ideas and messages, of course, could be
Exactly. That
transmitted
is our
through
concern.
films.
The violence, the fabrications, the manipulations, the unrealistic things that are thrown at the audience and to make believe them, and things, concepts going in the wrong direction. We are not in all films are we looking for the truth. Are we searching
Of
for the
course.
truth? No. It's more like a meal served, an entertainment meal served in the platter. And so I think that's a great difference between theater and films. And theater people carry more responsibility on their shoulders because they face live public in front of them. So in that sense, I think you are doing a great job. So we'll be back to you, ma'am, with
Thank
more
you.
questions. And meanwhile, I I invite Professor Prasanjit sir to be with us. Unmute his mic.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Yes, sure.
Yes, sir. Welcome, sir.
Right, right. Thank
And
you.
since you have been a scholar, a student, a teacher, a professor of philosophy, and I think philosophy is the mother of all subjects, of all learning that we have been doing since ages. Now, here, since we are concerned with the films and media, do you think the current state of media and films, they challenge our epistemological understanding of reality, of truth, of formation of knowledge, and the traditional philosophical concepts like we used to study and take very seriously, like truth and love and reality? Do you think these are challenged now because of the current state of media and films?
Yes, I mean, one can experience a kind of simulation, a kind of a simulacral reality, where you have this hyper reality, which has
Hmm.
no connection with whatever, with sensible reality.
Ground
So, a
reality.
kind of a reproduction, a kind of manipulated imagery which serves the purpose of digitalization and virtualization, which distances people from their sensible world, and the very
Hmm.
sense of the world gets lost, so much so that we meaningfully exist in a social world is now mimicked in the form of certain kinds of enactments. The enacted form of violence, the symbolism, the pattern, and the kind of other paraphernalia of that symbolism that completely constructs a different notion of the world, in which the present subjectivity, the present sense of being ethical, the present sense of preserving the set of human relations based on which we progress in our life, can be so easily altered by way of mimicking it and then altering it to a different set of images altogether, is something that really challenges our notion of reality. And this is simulacral reality, as Jab Baudrillard would like to call it. On the other side of it, behind production of such a simulacra, is that kind of a sense of sacrifice, a wish for dying, a kind of a necrophilia, a necro perspective grows larger and larger as one is totally decentered and one is totally decontextualized in the form of representation. with which one's experiential life and the lived world do not really match. And there is a disjunction, an impact of disruption. A kind of disrupted or disruptive technology takes over the senses, entirely desensitizes the capacity to cognize, and introduces a different kind of a relationship between the image and the human, and thereby altering the very process of perception, very process of living, is something that is a big challenge at this moment. And this is taking its extreme form in the process of digitalization, in the form of bringing AI, robots, and a variety of these robots, including sex robots, for example, or robots that teach you theology and religion, or
Hmm.
robots that start teaching you about ethics and morality. And occasionally, it answers some of your question by using the linkages between languages, and turns the real world into a large language model, as it happens in ChatGPT. So you can see this kind of an inbuilt crisis that is coming through this kind of a world which is hyperreal. And this is what precisely is today's problem, if I may just introduce the issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a whole gamut of knowledge in one capsule that you said that yes. And do you think this is leading to an existential crisis even more than earlier? Earlier, also, man was engulfed in those queries of existentialism. What am I? Who am
Absolutely,
I?
absolutely,
It's
absolutely. Because
aggravating. It's
yes,
getting more serious. And
yes, in fact,
do,
yes.
do you think the mental health of the whole generation, which is growing up with AI and digitalization and violence in media and films, do you think that mental health has some? Do you have some control over that?
I mean, this whole mediatization in the process of digitalization and virtualization is a process of controlling the process of cognition itself. So it's a very large process of surveillance where everyone can be watched at. It's a
Hmm.
kind of a digital panopticon, if you
No,
like to use a
I think
Foucauldian term.
it's more commercialization than the
Uh,
the cognition part.
Commercialization is in terms of propagating a certain kind of a desire,
No,
a
but
felt
the
absence.
purpose is profit. Purpose is
Not so,
profit.
not so simple, because as Guy Debro has called that, the spatial is reduced to the temporal, and temporal images become the ultimate frontier of consumption, and human
Hmm.
beings become consumers of images. It's a kind of a paradigm shift from consumers of material or produced substances to something that is more imagiastic. But this transition happens by way of a certain kind of an attachment, by way of a certain kind of an addiction or seduction or consumption of certain kind of an illusion. And that creates a separate sense of materiality, an
Hmm.
entirely new set of substances
Concept.
that are to be
The
consumed
concept has changed
in
altogether.
terms of
So,
brands, not in
hmm.
terms of products anymore, in
Okay.
terms of the kind of capitalization
Hmm.
value, which is a kind of an abstract value, but symbolized in certain forms of capital accumulation, which is an
Yeah.
accumulated form of hyperimaging,
Hmm.
which is connected to the virtual world as well. You see, so it's a kind of a complicated process of changing the whole relationship that produces an ordinary economy, and it is transformed into a virtual, digital, and
Hmm.
consuming virtual products kind of an economy, which further leads to a kind of sacrifice, a kind of death wish, a kind of wish to totally empty oneself, a self
Hmm.
emptying proleptic wish, which is psychoanalytically a deeper form of consumption of the images and being affected with an A by this. So this
So
is
what
the,
I understand is that you
yeah.
are kind of eating yourself and you are getting hollow because of the things that you are grappling outside and
No,
grasping.
self emptying here would mean that you empty out your desire. But as you empty out your desire suffers twice. First, from the lack of an objectification, and
Hmm.
second, from what is being consumed in the form of an image. Both
Hmm.
these come together as an affront on your very sensibility. So much so that you are totally immersed in the form of virtual, altered, enhanced kind of a virtual world in which you are gaming. And in the process of gaming, every bit of information can be weaponized. You can turn a lie into truth, a truth into a lie very
Hmm.
easily. And
Producing
though we
desires, gratifying desires, producing desires, gratifying desires, landing to nowhere. This is what we are
I mean,
heading
in a sense, it
in a
is
way.
like that. But
In
at the same
simplified
time,
words.
it's a process, being
Hmm.
caught in a process, and not so much into the output. That
Hmm.
binary between the input and the output, the binary between a producing world of labor and an aesthetic world of representation, is now blurred in the form of a process of simultaneous production and consumption of images, a
Hmm.
simultaneous process of externalization of your desire and internalization of certain objects of that desire, which is
Hmm.
expressed by Jacques Lacan very, very interestingly
Hmm.
when he says that the object in the mirror looks to be closer than
It
than they
actually is.
actually are.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's a kind of a mirror image of consumption, which you keep consuming in the process of producing and in the process of consuming. And that engagement is an engagement of a different kind. It's desubjectivation, or a kind of an altered subjectivity with which one is entering into this mediatized world of violence. And this entire process of transition is so subtle. It's not
Hmm.
at all gross. It is so much of filled with so much of new kinds of images. It's filled with a certain experience of cataclysm. It's a kind of a sense of satisfaction that arises from a certain sense of being endangered, a certain sense of being harmed, but at the same time a sense of being pleased as well by being
Some
harmed.
sort of gratification is there, which
I mean,
triggers the
yes, but
which
gratification
triggers
not in
thirst.
simple terms. It's gratification and degratification and
Hmm.
re-gratification. Like
Hmm.
Deleuze is deterritorialization and re-territorialization
So,
within a network.
in simple words, if I say that we are running faster and faster than our older generations were, but we are reaching nowhere. Faster and faster and faster in a faster race, but reaching nowhere, and in a vicious circle. And because the amount of desires we are emitting and gratifying and emitting, and it becomes a vicious circle, and we are kind of trapped. So, what my concern is that today, when we are consuming lots of media, films, violence. So, what are the ethical considerations that arise in this consumption, particularly the issues of violence and the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes? That become models for our young generation, or even for us, for even the middle-aged people. Those stereotypes that are fabricated, manipulated, digitized. So, what are the ethical considerations that are coming up in this context?
One of the major ethical consideration would be our role, as chooser of consumption, how we choose a certain aspect of this
Selection of
entire digital world or the virtual world, how we are going to choose it. Is it that it is given on a platter and we are supposed to be suo moto consumers of it? We have been turned into a kind of a passive receivers or a
Hmm.
passive consumers to
That's
certain
my
kinds of
point, sir.
images.
Not everybody is so judicious. Like,
Yeah.
we are professors, we are thinkers, we are writers, but a common man is not so judicious, or he is not so selective. So things are coming upon him, and he served a platter full of beautiful delicacies, and he ingests everything without even giving a second thought. So there lies the problem. Everything is going inside, whether it is toxic or hyper toxic or less toxic. So, what could be done about this?
I
Somewhere
mean,
ethically.
this is where Hannah Arendt used to say, that's a kind of a thoughtless mode of action, as you have
Yeah,
very rightly said. Now we have been reduced to that kind of a thoughtless consuming machine.
culture. Yeah.
Yes, and that machine has to be now re-centered back to our human life. But while we are trying to recenter it, we are confronting new issues like artificial life, we are confronting issues related to artificial intelligence. We are confronting more and more virtual realities that are waiting all around us, as if we are moving from one such virtual world to another virtual world. Now, in such a situation, where we can see that certain stereotypes actually propagate this kind of a movement as something like a faster movement. We move faster into a world of violence because of certain stereotypes, because of certain propagation of certain types of discourses of hate, because of
Exactly.
a certain mode of othering entirely built around a kind of an artificially concocted worldview, whereby truth can be turned into lie and lie can be turned into truth. The
Exactly.
post-truth world, that is presented before us, where people's choices are easily manipulated, and they are not really deliberated in the public space in most cases. So therefore, we must have protocols of deliberation. We must have a sense of governance in such a situation where we're able to disseminate what is so good and what is not so good, and we are able to decide in a certain way what we should give to our children and what we should withdraw from our children, what we should ourselves also hanker for, or what ought to be happening has to be also projected in that virtual reality in the form of a talk, in the form of a discussion, or in the form of a new argumentation, by drawing its resources from philosophy, from science, from culture studies, and from certain other epistemologies that are available all around. If we are not able to connect ourselves to these epistemologies, what is happening is this, that there is a certain kind of a disruption of our own senses, of our
Yeah.
own capacity to learn and understand, which is disconnected from our form of life, the lived experience in terms of which we are living our everyday life. So we need to return to our everyday life and concerns by bouncing back from this virtual world to, again, the social world. Howsoever much it is disrupted, we need to return to that social world. How we return and exactly how we make that possible is a kind of a creative enterprise. And this creative enterprise has to be carried out culturally, politically, ethically, epistemologically, so that the epistemic injustice that is committed on us can be staved off in a certain way, and we can recover our sense of being the subject within our own culture, within a kind of a critical culture of questioning, within a critical understanding of history and our past, instead of being stereotyped and regimented into a discourse of a discourse of regimentation. So there are ways and means to come out of it, and one should
But
find ways.
don't you think the more we try to escape, the more we are trapped into it? Because now we think that even if we as a generation would move out of
No, I mean, it's a kind of
time,
a
we would lose our art and culture in the hands of this digital media. And because here we are concerned with media and films, don't you think they are not going to follow our trend? We as scholars could take a route, okay, into philosophy, into culture, into heritage, into books, into coming back to the old concept of truth and beauty. But when we are talking about media and films, uh, whom should we whom should we hold responsible for initiating a change back to the culture, back to our path of culture, where
I
our
mean,
epistemological questions are answered?
yes,
Who could we hold responsible?
I mean, it is the human subjects, the political subjects, who find a representation in art and who can act as a creator as well as a recipient of that art. So it's a kind of simultaneously bringing together all possible roles
So we
in
need to
order
have
to,
representatives from all sectors in our art
yes, we
and
need to
culture
join them
sector.
together, which is
Hmm.
disrupted by our virtual sensibility. And hyperreal has to be deconstructed into real again. I mean, if I say so. And in order to do so, we need to conjoin, we need to collaborate, we need to network between a variety of critical initiatives that examines what is happening. So a kind of a critical self-examination, a kind of an intense self-criticism, a kind of an evaluation and re-evaluation of what is already evaluated in terms of finding the right kind of values and right kind of approaches have to be carried out, which is an intellectual, cultural battle, without which film and media cannot really bring out anything for us, even. Yeah.
True, Dr. Biswas, that sums up all the things, that evaluation, critical understanding, then evaluation, then coming back to our traditional philosophical concepts with the help of representatives from suitable sectors. It should be a conjoined effort. So it has to be an effort, an initiative to come back to the authentic search for truth and the nature of reality, which actually is the question, the existential question of life, of human life. So this is what we are heading to, that media and films, this sector could also be transformed and gotten back to track with the help of certain representatives, and people from art, culture, philosophy, and even political setup could come together, join hands, and do something in this direction. We'll come back to you, Professor Biswas. Thank you so much for the responses. And moving on, I now invite Professor Taron to please unmute his mic so that we could have a brief discussion with him. Welcome, Professor Taron. Since you also have been a scholar, a professor of political philosophy, and you've been a student of psychology as well, what according to you is the extent of the impact of violent films and media on individuals' attitudes and behaviors, especially regarding violence? Sir.
Okay, cordial greeting to all who join us on this day, and of course, thanks for the invitation from the director of the International Academy of Ethics, and very especially to Dr. Anand, who makes this space for reflection possible. Very well. On the subject that concerns us today, I will begin by saying that the relationship between cinema and the media with the exercise of violence has been a subject that has been addressed since the mid-20th century. Basically, analysis that address the influence of violent images in cinema and the role played by the media in human behavior and in the society in general. Specifically, it has been said that continuous exposure to violence in cinema and other media can have generated a kind of desensitization in people. Desensitization that would end up normalizing aggressive behavior. In this sense, it is assumed that the repetition of violent images lead to the imitation of violent behavior. An imitation of violent behavior that is especially evident among young people and people inclined to aggressiveness. But on the other hand, some studies have questioned the direct relationship between violence in the media and violence in real life. And what is argued is that viewers are able to distinguish between fiction and reality, and that most people are not directly affected by what they see in movies or in the media. In addition, the role of censorship and the classification of violent contents has been debated. Of course, beyond the degree of effect and influence, there is the fact of the naturalization of violence in in both film and other media. Naturalization means that even if does not generate a symptom of aggression in the majority, the truth is that the majority sees and feel that to some extent violence is a valid method to resolve conflict. It is not enough to impose restriction or the exhibition of broadcasting of violent film or television programs. In cinema, violence is shown rapidly, and it is precisely in that repetition that the problem lies. It is the formula for success a producer more interested in
True.
business than in the effect in the generic in society, of course directly affecting the vulnerable young population.
Hmm.
Those who defend this type of work, both in cinema and in other media, argue that freedom of expression cannot be limited, that parents of guardian must play an active role in the choice and supervision of the consumed by their children. However, it is important to keep in mind that the relationship between film, media, and violence is complex and multifaceted. Facets. Although some studies suggest a possible influence of violent images on human behavior, must spare agree, that media violence is only one of many factors that may contribute to violence in society. Other factor, yes, education, social environment, personal history, and mental health, of course, also play a role. But it is also clear that the media can negatively enhance these factors. It is true that constant exposure to violence in movies and the media has an impact on people with less education and less structured values. People who lack a solid foundation of ethical and moral principles may be more susceptible to being influenced by the violent images they see in the media. When dealing with young people or those in developmental stage, it would, of course, it could be important to consider how exposure to violence may alter their perception of really and their behavior. Children and adolescents are in the process of forming their value system and may be more affected by what they see in movies and the media. A clear example, the massacres committed in the United States by snipers. Constant exposure to violence can desensitize people, and that means that people can become less sensitive or even insensitive to violence at its consequence. I believe this can lead to a more permissive attitude toward violence. It can lead to a decrease in fight for victims, and it is can, of course, lead to aggregate tolerance of aggression. It is important to keep in mind that the influence of violence in film and media is not deterministic. Not everyone exposed to violence in the media becomes violent. becomes violent. But
So here,
as
here I would
I
like
have
to
heard
here
already
I would like
say,
to ask
they
one
may
question.
become more tolerant.
Sorry for intervening, because this is a very important point that
Yes,
violence in films is not the only factor which determines violence in society. This is one point you covered. This is very true. There are other factors also, the mental health, the other social issues also, which come before any kind of violence in society. But here, my point is that violence was always there in the films. Films always had some amount of some intensity of violence in the form of a villain or a sequence or a story. But now our point is that the exposure of our youth and children is to films and media is more than it was ever in the past. The exposure has increased many-fold. So, is it because of that that we are affected more by violence through the films and media? And secondly, the media was not projecting social violence in a way it is doing now. So, these are the two concerns which actually connect to the ethical concerns of our academy. That violence was there in the films, but why now are we more affected by that violence? Because we are more exposed to that in intensity, in the number of hours, and the population that gets access to that violence. So my question is, sir, uh, since we are exposed to that violence and it is served free to us, like we are all the time watching media films in one form or the other, so there is a little difference between what was happening in the past in films and what is happening now in the films, is that we have more access to it. So what should be done about that? The access will be there because we are living in a digital age. So with the films and media pouring on us 24/7, what do we do to filter that stuff, or to filter that stuff from reaching our social ground reality? That is
yes.
our concern.
Uh, I think that it's necessary to talk about its responsibility. The primary responsibility lies with parents, caregivers,
Yeah.
and educators who must guide and monitor children and adolescents exposure to media violence. But that doesn't absolve those who endorse and those who produce such material from responsibility.
But don't you think we need to go to the core of the problem, where that product is being devised, the product of violence? Some filtering has to be there with the parents, with the society, with the children, at the receiver's end. But don't you think there has to be some responsibility which should be set at the makers also? Like for the theatricals, we saw Ma'am Diana is kind of
Yes,
projecting theater in a way which affects the audience in a positive way. What about the filmmakers? I mean, how is
yes,
the scene in your South America?
yes, and
How
those
are
are
the people taking it?
who produce such material from responsibility. I would like to point out that when reference in main to the media in the contents of the influence and violence and very broad spectrum and media and enclave. That is that is we are talking about television, radio, cinema, music, and of course, video game. We are also talking about newspaper, magazine, website, and of course, social network. Each of this media has its own scope and in own format, but all of them play a role in the transmission of information in entertainment and in the development of culture messages to audience. Therefore, when we talk about the influence of the media on violence, we consider the exposure and impact of violence through these very diverse forms of media.
True. So we have been like collectively delving on this one point that the source from which this violence is coming has been there earlier also. It's not new to the world. But now that the exposure is complete, it is 24/7, and every age group is indulged in, ingesting the whole content without any judgment, without any discretion. So we need to be more cautious about it, because we are going in a direction where society is now full of violence, and it is imperative to recognize that we transcend the theoretical discourse. What is happening is in practicality is more important than what we talk in theory. So thank you, Professor Taron. We'll get back to you once again. Thank you for answering our questions. It has been a very fruitful discourse. Now, what we have come to understand from three different discussions from three different eminent scholars with us today, that it is a serious issue, no doubt, but then we have different perspectives of handling it. Now, artificial intelligence is there in the world. We cannot escape it. Digital transformation has already happened. We cannot escape it. So, what we have to do is to go on with a more practical approach about doing something about it as students of philosophy, students of art, culture, and psychology, as students of theater and films. So, my last question to all panelists would be, how can our collaborations with different sections of society, between writers, between academicians, policymakers, the media, the entertainment industry, how can our collaboration contribute to promoting responsible media consumption and minimizing the potential negative effects of violent content? Because, as we said, violence was always there in society, in films, and somewhat in some proportions in media also. But now the scene is a little different because of different reasons. So, my final question to all would be, how can the collaborations, as Professor Biswas pointed out, it has to be a conjoined effort. So, how can the collaboration between writers, poets, academicians, philosophers, policymakers, and the entertainment industry people contribute to promoting more positive environment, more responsible media consumption? So I would invite Madam Diana, so if you would like to answer the question, ma'am, so that we come to a conclusion, a more practical conclusion to this problem.
Yes, thank you. I think it is essential to collaborate across the fields. And we are entering into the times that we need really to come together. And I really appreciate very much what Professor Biswas said about need to, from hyper real to become real. And the only way to become real is to get to know other fields than our fields. So I think this is exactly what we are doing right now. It is so important that artists are together with philosophers, are together with psychologists, with scientists, with economists, and so on. So in that way, eventually we can understand the situation better and then be equipped to deal with it. But I really think there are 2 points here. One point is that we are confronting the capitalism that went mad and that went completely wild for the profit. And I can refer to the words of the Rosa Luxemburg, famous political philosopher. She said more than 100 years ago that capitalism will burn the world. And we are at the edge of witnessing that, or already it is happening. So we need all of us. We need all the forces, really. We need the people that are coming from very different cultures, parts of the professions, and parts of lives to think together. And then another point I would like to say: think together. This is so important because we are all in the age where this kind of the false individualistic approach is so much gratified. And I'm not speaking about I mean, in praise of masses and not individualistic thinking, but I'm speaking about the power of thinking together when it is not important whose idea something is, but where did we come together?
Yeah,
And
a
this is
concrete solution is important.
exactly.
Who is giving it is not important right now because we are in a fix right now. Thank you, ma'am Diana. Thank you for that very positive approach. Over to Professor Biswas once again. What is your take on this question that how can these collaborations contribute actually to promoting positive?
Yes, yes. We have to encourage diversity and inclusion while respecting users' autonomy to choose in the virtual world. Because in most cases, the user is not allowed to choose. The process of choosing is determined by the market forces, as
It's
Professor
imposed.
previously
It
was.
is more imposed. Yeah. You're
I
not
mean,
given the time and space to
yes,
actually
yes, but
decide.
it is presented as a kind of a pleasurable moment of choice,
Exactly.
not really in the form of an enforced imposition.
No, a
And
delicacy in a platter. You
uh,
are
and and
tempted.
and that's what actually makes one naturalize their wrong choices or
Yes.
normalize their wrong choices.
It's more an
And
instinct that
also,
works.
this
Yeah.
allows a larger gamut of production of violence, production of disruption. So now
So
to
according to
collaborate.
you, inclusiveness and diversity is the answer.
Now to
We need to be
collaborate,
more
we need to
diverse, more
we
inclusive.
need to we need to take a perspective from the victim's point of view. you know
Yeah.
winner takes it all in the digital world, but the loser's point of view, those who are losing very important aspects of their life, those who are in a process of probably losing very important values that they have so far nurtured and inculcated, those who are looking at a lost generation, those who are looking at a lost space, those who are
Yeah. One
facing
who
a
can see the
terrible
past and the future.
a
Sir, I
terrible
remember.
climactic injustice, those who are facing vulnerabilities,
Exactly.
precarity, those
I remember.
experiences are
Yeah.
to be brought together in a certain
Together.
way in our cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary collaboration.
So
Yes.
we need a vision. We need a vision on which we could work. And I remember Bertrand Russell's essay, Machines and Emotions. Long back, he wrote, machines will take over human emotions and you will keep watching one day. So that is one day. This is the day when we are now looking for a solution to this fix. Thank you for joining us, Professor Biswas. It was so nice to have your answers and your diverse viewpoints. So, Professor Theron, I would also like to have your view on this. How can our collaborations between different sectors actually contribute to the promotion of responsible media consumption and to minimize the negative effects of violence? So please unmute yourself. We can't hear
Same
you.
time, it
Yeah.
shows us many. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
now
hear
we
me?
hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, please go on. Please
These
go
are
on.
yes. Okay. These are questions that the academic community should strive to answer. And I think that also the academic community should strive to put the topic as a topic of constant debate. I think, however, that it is very clear that in the social world and in the field of education itself, it is necessary to encourage critical thinking. And of course, it is necessary to guide and discuss what the media produce and the intention they have in producing this type of culture object. Definitely, the lack of critical thinking and orientation regarding what is being, what can be an important factor in the way people perceive and they respond to violence in film, in the media, in film, video games, and why not in the world of informative discourse that also exploit the violent side of the narratives they produce on a daily basis. In this regard, I think it is important to keep in mind the significance of some of the consideration I've already mentioned it for the contents of this panel. Critical thinking is the ability to analyze and the ability to critically evaluate the contents that is consumed. It is fundamental. Critical thinking involves question and reflection on representation of violence in film.
Yes, sir. That's true. That's true. What I understand from your words is that in a world where violence is excess, where digital information is in excess, we need to be critical. We need to be very cautious about the things we are consuming, and we need to critically evaluate and filter the product that we are getting into our house or inside our minds. Actually, we need to filter the toxic out of the non-toxic and the non-toxic out of the toxic, and then segregate the two heaps and then let things enter our lives. This is what I understand from your words, sir. Thank you so much for giving your views on this platform. We are so honored to have you here. I now invite Professor Dr. Jarnail Singh Anand for his concluding remarks and observations on this theme. Dr. Anand.
Thank you, Purneet, and I'm really happy that we have had a very fruitful discussion on the idea of films, media, and violence. And our panelists were highly informed, and we have been able to lay bare the various layers of this reality, which is half real and half fabricated. The overall thrust of our observations and discussions has been that all is not lost. No doubt, as Dr. Prasanjit pointed out, that we are at the receiving end. We are passive consumers. We don't have many choices. But the fact is that we have the choice ultimately, because uh, the digital revolution, it has the artificial intelligence, everything has added to something good also. It is not entirely bad. Let us sift the good and the bad. And Dr. Diana was saying that we should be able to look at films not as simply entertainment, but as part of art and culture. If we are able to shift and bring it home to our youth, that what you are seeing is not crass entertainment. You have to take something from it to your home, which you will apply in your family. So these things, if we are able to bring home to them, or as Dr. Taran was also saying, we should develop critical thinking. Ultimately, the things rest here that we must question what is going on. The filmmakers are after money, and in their craze for money, they make highest grossers, highest money making film. But They will not make this film if we don't go there. Look at the youth who are flogging to see these senseless violence. Every film on OTT starts with a dark scene. Somebody is carrying a sword. Somebody is going to kill somebody. This type of, I wonder what we are being fed on.
Sensational.
And and tell you, there is on every film there is written violence, nudity, foul language, 18 plus. This is what I mean. They are catering to our base instincts and they want to make money out of it. It's a very simple game. There is no art, no culture, and creative liberty is being used to, defile the tastes of the people, the taste of the youth. Somebody was commenting here, Dr. Maya and some others also. What about video games? What type of heroes, demigods we are presenting before our small kids? So I think we are being intelligent people, awakened people, we are in a state of shock. We are unable to take these electric digital shocks. It is better if we all raise our hands and say enough is enough. So, friends, thank you very much. And it is my duty to thank Dr. Praneeth Jaggi, particularly, and Randhir ji, who are controlling this show. Dr. Praneeth Jaggi has put up a very brilliant performance today. So, my deep thanks to them. Now, I
Thank
ask
you, sir. Thank you, sir. And I think all these are formulas that are working very well to amass good wealth. So, what is needed at our part is a little more wisdom, a little more seriousness. So, with that awareness, we aspire to foster an atmosphere of robust dialogue even further, where diverse perspectives, research based insights, and constructive criticism converge to eliminate our understanding even further, like we have initiated today. So, through rigorous intellectual exploration and an open minded exchange, we have tried to uncover profound insights. And we have also tried, in a little bit, in a little very little volume to generate innovative solutions that would shape the future of media, films, and violence. So, may this panel discussion serve as a catalyst for transformative conversations, fostering a media landscape that not only entertains but also educates, also inspires, and cultivates compassion. Because ultimately, that is the objective of our Academy of Ethics. We are here to foster that empathy, to cultivate that compassion. So, towards the end of this session, I would like to thank all the panelists, eminent scholars, Professor Biswas, Professor Diana, Professor Theron, for sparing their valuable moments as well as sharing their valuable insights with us. I'm overwhelmed to be a part of this, listening to their views.
And Praneeth, thanks to all the viewers who are.
I am doing it, sir. I thank our President, Dr. J.S. Anand, Vice President, Dr. Maya, Coordinator, Madam Dr. Molly Joseph, for organizing this short yet explorative event. A special thanks to Professor Randhir Gautam and Dr. Mukesh Grover for their technical and other assistance. Together, let us illuminate the path towards a more positive and responsible media ecosystem. So, wrapping up for now, a very, very special thanks to the large, vast, silent yet expressive audience who has been very active in the chat box. We will certainly read and respond to those chats, and we will have you all next time in our next discussions. So till we meet for another illuminating session, this is Praneeth Jaggi. Thank you all for joining me tonight on this panel discussion hosted by the International Academy of Ethics, India. Thank you so much and good night.
Thank you.